Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. From French fries to pomegranates to grape pomace and more, cattle can find nutritive value in what otherwise would be considered waste and probably sent to a landfill. Dr. Robin White, Assistant Professor of Animal and Poultry Science at Virginia Tech, joins us today to talk about how ruminant animals can help address the current challenges related to food waste in North America's food system. Welcome, Dr. White. Great to have you with us.
Well, thanks, Sarah. I'm happy to be here.
For those of you that are joining us here online, we want to thank you for taking the time to tune in. If you have any questions for Dr. White, you can post those in the chat area on your screen. And if you're joining us from social media, you can post them right there in those channels. So, Dr. White, you've taken a look at the role that cattle can play in addressing food insecurity in our society. Can you talk to us a bit about your research and how you went about taking this assessment?
Yeah, so it's important to recognize that food insecurity is a massive challenge globally. Most of us are not aware, but the proportion of the population experiencing food insecurity is increasing on a year-by-year basis. About 40% of the global population cannot afford a healthy diet. And the estimates are something like a quarter of the global population are probably experiencing, at a minimum, micronutrient deficiencies. So the food sufficiency challenge is a major focus for us in agriculture, right? That's really our bread and butter is providing human edible nutrients for society. In our work, we're interested in bridging the gap between that benefit of terrestrial livestock and some of the challenges that are presented by our animal production systems. So we look at things like the greenhouse gas emissions coming from our food production system, the affordability of that system, and the nutrient composition or the nutrient contributions to the human edible food supply. And we can point out through analyzing all of those outcomes at the same time that there's really important trade-offs in the food production system. If we go toward a system that exclusively focuses on something like minimizing greenhouse gases, for example, we probably are going to experience more nutrient sufficiency challenges than we experience today. Similarly, if we focus exclusively on something like the health or the affordability of our food production system, we need to find strategies to mitigate those emissions. So that's really kind of the take-home message from our work at this point, that there's really important balance there in understanding the role of livestock in food security.
Now, your work has been in ruminants, perhaps even more than that, but are ruminants one of the more efficient producers of protein when we look across the spectrum as to, the livestock spectrum?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and it all depends on how you define efficiency. So if we're talking about just the mass of total feed in versus the mass of human food out, ruminants don't look so great in terms of that type of efficiency, because ruminant animals consume all sorts of materials that humans can't consume. And they have to rely on that microbial digestion to be able to extract nutrients from that material. However, if we start to take that role of society, their role in society into account in the way that we define efficiency, and we look at the human edible nutrient conversion, ruminants are substantially more effective at producing protein than many of our other terrestrial animal species in particular.
Did you look at, so you've looked at food waste and co-products and all those things going into livestock. Is there certain food waste that perhaps is better at being converted into protein sources, or how does that work?
Yeah, so again, this all depends on the objective of the operation or the objective of the way that we're defining better. If we're talking about things like the profitability of our farming systems, what we really want to focus on is those food waste products or food co-products that support our productive functions for livestock. This is going to be those that are particularly digestible. Oftentimes, they'll be kind of these mid-protein feeds that help address simultaneously the animal's amino acid needs and energy needs. Now, if we look on maybe a different definition of better, and we're focusing on that particular role we just talked about, the human inedible material conversion, those types of co-products that are going to optimize the ratio of human edible material out relative to human edible material in are going to be those that are really high fiber products. And so, again, it very much depends on what your goal is and how you're defining that kind of goalpost that you're working toward.
Is there a comparison that can be made when it comes to the methane emissions, the levels, when we're talking about feeding food waste to ruminants? Because we put food waste in a landfill, we're getting methane. We're using food waste as a co-product to feed to livestock. You're also getting methane, but are you getting less or more, or is there a comparison? Is that something that we should look at?
Yeah. So what you're really getting at there is this challenge of how we allocate emissions within our national or even international assessments of greenhouse gases. Right now, the highly palatable numbers that consumers are starting to become more familiar with are things like carbon footprints. And those footprints have to make assumptions about where emissions are allocated. So co-products are a perfect example. Those co-products are produced because of a primary industry. Should they be charged as an expense to that primary industry, or should their emissions be charged as an expense to the end user? In this case, maybe the ruminant consuming that feed. We have different strategies that are advocated. Sometimes we allocate based on the economic value of the products that are produced from a system. Sometimes we allocate based on mass. But the truth is, the best strategy is to really expand the way that we're assessing the system. So in order to really ask that question of, are we getting less methane by feeding these materials to ruminants versus landfilling them, we need to do a proper system expansion to explore that. But take-home message there is really that the conclusions and the numbers in a lot of these environmental assessments are very much driven by those assumptions around allocation.
Interesting. So if a producer wants to either find a source of co-products or determine if that's a route they want to go, how best to go about that process?
Yeah, so a great strategy would be to start by working with a nutritionist who can help identify what your maybe economic needs are in the ration. And what I mean by that is exploring how much you're paying for different nutrients. Are you in a situation where your feed cost is predominantly limited by the amount of energy you need to get to those animals? Is it predominantly limited by the amount of protein or amino acids? Perhaps it's related to specific vitamins and minerals. In most cases, our feed cost is going to be driven predominantly by the energy and protein contents of our diets. And depending on our physiological stage, that might help dictate the type of co-product that we would explore for inclusion. The next steps really are looking at what's available within the area. A lot of times the purchase of these co-products does have to be done in kind of a time-sensitive and a local manner. Other times they can be purchased on kind of traditional commodity markets. So identify kind of what the gaps are in the current diet, figure out the role of the co-product and what you're substituting. Do some economic assessment of what's affordable and what's available in the area, and then make sure that final diet actually matches the animal's nutrient needs.
Right. Don't just go add it in there and expect to have, to make sure it's safe and nutritious. Do some homework ahead of time.
Yeah. And it is important to recognize that we don't have a lot of scientific literature available to summarize use of a lot of the emerging co-products that are available for producers to purchase and to feed to animals. And so making sure you're working with somebody that has some experience, being able to kind of tailor your ration formulation tool or approach to what they're going to expect from incorporating a particular co-product is a good strategy to abate some of that risk.
Right. It's not every day you're going to, just add French fries to your ration and without doing an assessment ahead. We do it all the time, but right? It's always part of our ration. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, I think that as ruminant animal producers, it's really our opportunity to leverage all of the dialogue right now about foods and the environment and efficiency to highlight the role of ruminants as a positive component of our food production system. They play a really unique role in their ability to convert this human inedible material into high quality sources of protein, but also micronutrients. And a lot of those micronutrients can't be found in sufficient density in other sources of food. So that recycling, or upcycling as the trendy word is, function is very much important in the way that we communicate around our production systems, but it's also important in the way that we're exploring what our production practices look like into the future, right? Really optimizing that role is where I see a tremendous opportunity for us moving forward.
Very good. I want to thank you so much for your time today. It was a great discussion, Dr. White.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Likewise, we want to thank all of you for tuning in and spending time with us. A reminder that all Feedstuffs 365 segments are available on feedstuffs.com. Also, a quick reminder that at the end of this month, we're going to be doing a 3-day conference on food waste and food loss. So if that's something that interests you, go down to the Feedstuffs webpage, the feedstuffs.com, and you'll find information there you can click on to register or to check out the agenda. Until next time, for Feedstuffs 365, I'm Sarah Muirhead.